Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into some really complex, high-stakes diplomacy.
That's right. We're looking at the ongoing talks between Russia and the U.S. about, well, a potential settlement in Ukraine.
Exactly. We'll explore a proposed agreement that's being discussed and also look ahead to a very anticipated meeting between Russian President Putin and U.S. President Trump.
And it's not just the main points. There are some, let's say, hidden legal issues that could complicate things significantly. It's quite the puzzle.
Definitely. So let's try and piece it together for you. First off, this proposed agreement, Russia and the U.S. are talking. What's actually being discussed?
Okay, so the core idea, the framework they're working on, has several parts. First, it's about securing territories currently under Russian control.
Which territories specifically?
We're talking about the Donetsk People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic, and Crimea, also parts of the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. Basically, areas Russia holds now.
Okay.
The goal seems to be freezing the fighting where it is now, establishing a ceasefire.
A freeze, not necessarily a final peace deal right away.
Right. The idea is to stop the shooting and then create conditions for what they're calling subsequent technical negotiations to hash out a final resolution later.
Got it.
And a really key part of this proposal is that the Russian army would stop its offensive actions in the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions right along the existing front lines.
So holding the lines there.
Exactly. But, and this is important, nothing is set in stone yet. The terms are apparently still being worked out. They could change.
And does Ukraine agree? Or Europe?
Well, that's the thing. The U.S. is reportedly working to get support from Ukraine and European allies for this framework. But that support is definitely not guaranteed. You can imagine why.
Yeah, giving up territory, even implicitly through a freeze, is a huge ask. So this agreement, this whole framework, it's being prepared for this big meeting, right?
Yeah.
Between Russian President Putin and U.S. President Trump.
That's the context, yes. This potential agreement seems timed for that meeting.
And when is this meeting supposed to happen?
It's expected pretty soon, actually. Likely next week, sometime between August 11th and 17th.
That soon, wow.
Yeah, the agreement to actually hold the meeting was just announced on August 7th. That came after U.S. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, visited Moscow.
Okay, so the wheels are turning fast. Do we know where they'll meet?
Well, Russian President Putin's assistant, Yuri Ushakov, confirmed they have agreed on a location. But they haven't announced it publicly yet.
Keeping it under wraps. Interesting. There's been speculation, though, right? Different places mentioned.
Oh, yes. Russian President Putin apparently suggested the UAE, U.S. President Trump, put forward Rome.
Rome. And I heard Ukrainian President Zelensky was okay with Rome, too.
He was, yes. But other places like Hungary and Switzerland have also been floated as possibilities.
So several options. But Rome might be complicated for Russia.
That's exactly right. Russia has indicated it's not keen on Rome. The reason given is that Italy is seen as, quote, too tied to Ukraine.
Too tied. Does that relate to the ICC, the International Criminal Court?
Precisely. That seems to be the major snag with Rome. Remember, the ICC issued arrest warrants for Russian President Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova back in March 2023.
Right, related to the alleged deportation of children from Ukraine.
Yes, alleging responsibility for that war crime. Now, Russian Foreign Ministry says ICC decisions don't apply to them because Russia never ratified the Rome Statute, the treaty behind the court.
But Italy did ratify it.
Italy ratified it way back in 2002. So, technically, ICC decisions are binding for Italy. This creates a potentially very awkward legal situation if Russian President Putin were to travel there.
A huge diplomatic and potentially legal headache.
It could be. Now, there were some reports, I think back in April 2025, suggesting the warrant might not be actively valid in Italy because of some procedural issue with the Minister of Justice not transmitting it.
Murky.
Very. But even with those reports, the potential for complications or just the bad optics likely makes Russia wary of Rome. It turns a potential meeting spot into a bit of a legal minefield.
Okay, so venue complexities aside, let's talk about what the leaders themselves are saying. What are Russian President Putin's conditions for actually reaching a settlement? Have they changed?
Well, on August 1st, Russian President Putin stated that Russia's conditions haven't really changed from what he laid out in June 2024. They're quite specific.
Why are they?
He insists on the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from 4 regions.
Yeah.
Luhansk People's Republic, Donetsk People's Republic, Kherson, and Zaporozhye.
So basically demanding Ukraine cede those territories entirely.
That appears to be the demand, yes. And the other major condition is that Ukraine must officially renounce any ambition to join NATO. Give up NATO membership for good.
Those are tough conditions.
Extremely. Russian President Putin said if Kyiv agrees to these points, starts pulling troops out, and formally rejects NATO, then Russia would, quote, immediately issue a ceasefire order and commence negotiations.
And what about meeting Ukrainian President Zelensky directly?
He indicated a meeting could happen under certain conditions, but then added those conditions are currently far off. So it doesn't sound imminent.
Right. A significant gap remains. Now, contrast that with U.S. President Trump. His approach seems different, very different.
Yes. U.S. President Trump has been very public about wanting to end the conflict. And quickly, remember, late July, he expressed dissatisfaction with Russian President Putin.
And set that deadline.
Exactly. First, it was 50 days. Then he suddenly shortened it to just 10 days for resolution.
Which just expired, right? August 8th.
It did, yes.
Yeah.
And the stated consequence, if the deadline wasn't met, was these huge secondary tariffs, like approximately 100% on Russia and anyone trading with them.
So a very aggressive, ultimatum-driven approach versus Russian President Putin's fixed demands. How does Ukraine see all this? What's Ukrainian President Zelensky pushing for?
Ukraine's position is clear. They want a full and immediate ceasefire. Not a partial truce, not a freeze that locks in current lines, a complete stop.
And they feel past attempts at de-escalation haven't worked.
Ukrainian President Zelensky mentioned that Ukraine tried things, like holding back on striking energy infrastructure, but felt those efforts were, in his words, violated by the Russians. It's fair to note, though, that Moscow has made similar accusations against Kyiv about violating ceasefires.
Of course. It's always complex. Is Ukrainian President Zelensky willing to meet just with Russian President Putin and U.S. President Trump?
He seems to insist on it. He wants a meeting that includes the presidents of Ukraine, the U.S., and Russia, a trilateral format.
So Ukraine wants a seat at the main table alongside the big powers. Makes sense. Now, what about Belarus? Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko often weighs in. What's his take?
Lukashenko generally thinks the U.S. needs to be more involved in finding a solution. He was actually quite critical of U.S. President Trump's ultimatum approach.
Oh, really? Why?
He suggested that setting ultimatums like that might just backfire,
Yeah.
leading to rejection rather than dialogue. He thinks it could harden positions.
Interesting point. What does he suggest instead?
He proposed that representatives from Russia and Ukraine should really meet directly and just talk. He expressed a belief that, proper negotiations between them could prevent future conflict.
But does he think the U.S. should be involved at all?
Yes. He stressed that U.S. representatives should be part of the process, too. He called U.S. involvement a necessity for success. So, direct talks, but with U.S. participation.
A kind of facilitated dialogue.
Perhaps. He also floated an interesting idea, suggesting Russian President Putin might agree to an air ceasefire.
An air ceasefire? What does that mean?
Basically, a pause in aerial attacks, like bombings and drone strikes, provided Ukraine does the same simultaneously. It's a specific, potentially verifiable step to de-escalate.
Could be a confidence-building measure, I suppose, if both sides trusted each other enough to stick to it.
That's the big if, isn't it? Trust.
Absolutely. Now, aside from these public positions, Russian President Putin has been busy on the phone recently, hasn't he? Consulting with other leaders.
He has. Quite a flurry of calls, actually, on August 8th. He spoke with 5 other leaders.
5? Who were they?
Chinese President Xi Jinping, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, no surprise there, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, and Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev.
Quite a list, covering key partners in Asia and the neighborhood. What was the main topic, the upcoming meeting?
Primarily, yes. Russian President Putin apparently shared the outcomes of that visit by U.S. President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Moscow.
So briefing key partners on the state of play with the U.S.?
Exactly. It's a way to keep them informed, maybe gauge reactions, possibly seek support or understanding for Russia's position and the diplomatic track being pursued.
And how did these leaders react? Generally supportive?
The readouts suggest general support for finding a way out of the crisis. Chinese President Xi Jinping apparently backed a long-term resolution. Lukashenko, as we know, valued the peace efforts. Indian Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's usual stance favoring a political and diplomatic solution.
So cautious encouragement for the process, it seems.
Pretty much. And it wasn't only about Ukraine in all those calls. With President Xi, for example, they also discussed Russian President Putin's upcoming trip to China for the SKO summit.
Ah, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting.
Right, and also events for the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Asia. Bilateral matters were also on the agenda with Lukashenko and Modi. So it shows Ukraine is a central piece, but it fits into a much larger picture of Russia's international relations.
Okay, so looking ahead, it's clear the diplomatic path is incredibly complicated. You have these starkly different demands. The proposed meeting next week between Russian President Putin and U.S. President Trump is obviously pivotal.
A huge moment, potentially.
Yeah, but it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? With positions so far apart, especially on territory and neutrality, is a lasting peace something that can be achieved through just one meeting or one agreement? Or is this maybe just maneuvering for the next stage of the conflict? It leaves you thinking about whether real resolution is truly within grasp right now.
A critical question indeed.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.